Hi everybody, I would like to return back to the very first introductory chapter. So if you've got the Blackboard PowerPoints there with you, this is back toward the beginning, the first couple of days. There's a section that I decided to skip over and just do post like this rather than take class time to do it. And that is to talk about some of the ways that some of the methods we use to evaluate whether personality theories are good ones or not, because some of them are good in some ways, others have strengths and limitations. So this will be kind of an overview that we'll be using for the rest of the semester to evaluate these. So the first criteria that we use is a criteria called verifiability. And this very simply asks, can we verify the theory through research? Can you do research on the theory and can you verify and find support for the theory? Can we test it through research? One way to think about whether this is true or not is whether the terms are well defined. Are the concepts clearly defined? Are they logically related? So for example, id, ego, superego is pretty difficult in terms of verifiability because how do you define those? They're parts of the mind, they are parts of the personality. You can't see them, we can't measure them directly like a blood test. So it's pretty tough to verify Freud's theory through research. On the other hand, something like behaviorism, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, it's pretty easy to measure when we give an animal or a person a reward and it repeats a behavior, then you know that they've been positively reinforced. So for example, behaviorism is pretty easy to verify through research. And since, as we talked about, obviously psychology is a science, it's rooted in the scientific method, this is probably one of the most critical ways to evaluate a theory. A second one we can talk about, which certainly is related, is called heuristic value. And if a theory is verifiable, chances are good it has heuristic value, and the opposite is true. If a theory is not verifiable, it's probably not going to stimulate a lot of research. And the way you know that is just by looking at the research literature. So for example, for Albert Bandura and self-efficacy, and just to refresh you, self-efficacy is a feeling that you can accomplish tasks, that it's kind of a confidence, it's a little bit more than that. There's tons of research on that one. But a theory like Maslow and self-actualization, that self-actualization is difficult to define, it's difficult to measure, so there is less research on this. So we want verifiability, and if that's true, then we're going to have heuristic value. That theory is going to have heuristic value. But all theories have value, even if we can't verify them through research. It's just a different type. And when we get to those theories in the class, I'll describe that a little bit more. Okay, a third criteria is internal consistency, and this looks at whether a theory contradicts itself. Do the concepts flow together logically? Do some of the ideas appear to be in contrast? So perhaps a theory, and Freud has some issues with this. It'll talk about something in a stage in childhood, and then they'll talk about something that appears to contradict that in adulthood. And actually, most of the theories we talk about this semester do pretty well here. Trait theory in particular does very well here. So as we go through the different theories this semester, some of this will become more clear. Fourth criteria is parsimony. This is a good word to understand. It means concise and simple. So the keep it simple, the whole keep it simple, stupid or silly or however you want to define that. Simple, concise theories are best. So this asks, does the theory have just a lot of complicated concepts? Does it explain things in a really complicated, lengthy way? Or does it have fewer concepts that are very easily measurable? So for Freud, for example, even though it seems like there's a lot of concepts in his theory, it's really very parsimonious. The way you were raised as a child, the way your parents treated you, that influences your preschool personality, which in turn influences your adult personality. So the basic idea is pretty simple. And most of the theories we talk about are pretty parsimonious as well. One problem with theories that are really parsimonious, though, is that it may not account for new findings. And since we're talking about Freud right now, this is certainly true. So the idea that people don't change after preschool, that their personality is pretty well set, well, what if you have situations where you do see substantial change? And that certainly happens in adulthood. that theory really can't account for that. Okay, a couple more. Comprehensiveness. Comprehensiveness asks, how much ground does a theory cover? How much territory does it cover? So I just put this picture up of a nice ground, nice ground picture, silly. Most theories have a focus, and broader theories aren't necessarily better, but too specific aren't necessarily better. So good theories should cover, most of them will cover one of these factors: biological causes of personality, cognitive causes, or social causes. Good theories have elements of all of those. And as an example, Freud's theory is entirely biological. He doesn't give any credence to cognitive causes, just a little bit to social and how your parents raise you, but generally it's biological. Versus Skinner, who's entirely social, it's entirely up to the environment to shape your personality, and he doesn't give any credence to these two. So how much ground does a theory cover? And then what aspects of personality does a theory cover is part of comprehensiveness. So does a theory cover development? Does it cover personality structures? Does it cover personality change and abnormal? Several of them do all of these. Freud's in particular does all of these. Carl Rogers' humanistic theory does all of these. But Skinner's does not. So generally, a good comprehensive theory is a better one as long as it doesn't get stretched too much. And then the final characteristics is functional significance. One of the things that you'll notice is important about this class for you is, what do these theories tell us about you? What do they tell us about you and your family and the people you're curious about and the people you care about? So functional significance says, how much does a theory help us understand human behavior? Because really, if it's not useful in understanding our everyday problems and our everyday issues, it really isn't useful at all. So the ultimate value in a theory of personality comes from how well can you know yourself and others. And every theory we're going to talk about this semester offers this to some extent. Others more than some. And for some of them, you'll just have to make up your mind as to how well you think that theory does. How much can you use this theory to apply to your own life in particular? So those are, okay, so those are the 6. Did I go through 6? 1, 2, okay, I'm counting to myself here. Yes, those are the 6 criteria that we're going to use. And as we go through the theories, we will come back to these and evaluate some of them as to how well they meet these criteria or not.